There you go. So tonight, again, this is annual meetings as storytelling. And we are just going to open with a couple of questions. Let me share my screen. Okay.
Will we get these too?
The slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are happy to make these available since we are doing the recording, and we always make available the recordings,
Thank
and
you.
I'm happy to make available the slides as well. Yes, so you don't need to take notes. But the slides are mostly to help us engage in a conversation. So this question, I would like you to respond in the chat if you would be willing. Those of you who are unfamiliar with how to use the chat, there should be a band of little icons on your screen, and you can find one that will allow you to type into the chat. So the first question is, what comes to mind for you when you think about an annual meeting in your congregation? What are things that come to mind for you? Oh, wow. All right. Electing new vestry members, elections, boring. Is this meeting just for those who have participated in congregational development? An agenda, celebration of ministry for the year previous and the year coming, passing the budget presentation, reports and a potluck, review of the previous year, potluck, food and fellowship, sharing the last year's story of the congregation, pancakes. Yes, indeed. Opportunity to celebrate. As someone who helped run a very small congregation, lots of work and keeping it fun. Review the past year, give thanks to God, sharing a meal, potluck and reports, goals for next year, budgets and elections. Hopefully I'll learn something. Yep. How are we doing? A lot of preparation and hurting others. Reports. Table talks. So yeah, so our annual meetings tend to be usually after services. They tend to involve food, right? They tend to involve reflecting on the past year. They tend to involve elections. For some people, they're pretty boring. For some people, there's an agenda. For some people, they feel like a reflection and a time to give thanks. So that is how we use and view annual meetings and our experience with them. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase storytelling? Go ahead and type that in. Celebration, a great opportunity to share faith, narrative, learning, entertaining and not boring, joy, my experiences, capturing imagination and interest, sharing experiences, fun, feeling connected. Oh, scary. Yeah. Sharing and comparing history, sharing experiences, creative messaging, once upon a time. Yeah. So storytelling can offer us opportunities for connection and fellowship and hospitality and history and discovery. And sometimes for some people, that makes it feel like those are longer reports. Learning more about one another's life and faith and about ourselves. So these are all things that storytelling evokes for us, relationships versus data. What we decided to do this evening is to really dive into how we can take this thing we call the annual meeting, which is actually required, and we're going to touch on that briefly. This thing that is a required thing, and there are a few things about it that are required, and infuse it with some of the benefits of storytelling that you've just highlighted. This idea of narrative, of celebration, of connection, of reflection, joy, interest. And as somebody said to me on Tuesday, this might offer us the opportunity to make the annual meeting something people don't dread, right? It might offer us the opportunity to make the annual meeting something that is promoting vitality in the congregation as community. And that's our goal here, is to really think about how can we take the power of storytelling and infuse our annual meetings with that power and that benefit that we get from understanding. And again, as the little description for this Zoom said, right? Our scripture shows us that storytelling is the way we connect generation to generation, that our stories they create our culture, they create our people, they create our sense of who we are, why we are, and what we are about. And that is what we want to be doing in our annual meetings. That is exactly what our annual meetings are really about. Although our annual meetings also are legally required and canonically required. So let's talk a little bit about that. So we have annual meetings because they are both legally and canonically required. As nonprofits in the state of Washington, they refer to us as membership organizations or membership corporations, and we are required to have annual meetings. Our diocesan canons reflects this requirement and makes it even more clear that each congregation must have an annual meeting between December 1st and February 28th of each year. We have a little bit in there about giving notice. The important piece is that we do know what we are supposed to do at these annual meetings. We are supposed to elect a vestry if it's a parish, elect delegates to convention, receive reports, and conduct any other business it may lawfully transact, whatever that means, right? So really, this is the time, this guarantees that once a year, every member of our membership corporation or organization is invited to come together and be part of some important aspects of our life together. Electing the people who are responsible for governance, receiving reports, and conducting other business. So one thing you might notice is that this does not mention mission congregations. And that is because actually, canonically, mission congregations, the bishop appoints the bishops' committee. Our bishop is very clear that for her, right, mission congregations should also be choosing those members through an election, and she accepts those as her appointments. Canonically, that could be done differently. It is not canonically required. It is what our bishop, the way she manifests her ecclesial authority with our mission congregations. So a couple other important things about this, just as you think about annual meetings, right? There's a broad definition of who is an elector or who gets to vote, right? It's communicant members in good standing and all other members who have been regular contributors. So that's important. And the other piece that, no one is checking this at the door, but actually you're not supposed to vote if you're not over 16. And that is actually not our diocesan requirement. That is the Episcopal Church requirement. So it is reflected here in our diocesan canons. The meeting is expected to be run by the rector or the vicar, or in the absence of a rector or vicar, a warden. So that is why we have annual meetings and the basic requirements of an annual meeting, none of which tell us how an annual meeting should be run or structured. It only tells us why we have to have them. So the how is what we are really interested in tonight. And I went through on our, we receive reports from all of your congregations on an annual basis. And I went through a couple of those reports and actually pulled out some example agendas from annual meetings. These are actual agendas, except for the fact that I couldn't find an agenda that looked like this. I could only find notes. So I recreated agendas based on the notes that were submitted to us from annual meetings in 2 congregations in our diocese. So one of these starts with an opening prayer, election, rector's report or remarks, has a facilities report, a financial report, and an election of convention delegates. This has met all of the requirements in the canons, as you can see, very explicitly. And the notes reflect that, the notes that I used to recreate this agenda. The second agenda is one that was where the notes were a little more casual, less structured, but still I was able to see how they spent their time. And that is review and acceptance of prior year meeting minutes and goals. And I would bet that the first group did that too, and it just wasn't in the notes. Review of ministries, outreach, and accomplishments. So thinking about this past year. Discussion of new ministries. What are the possibilities? What are our opportunities? Reading and acceptance of financial reports and elections. So again, they have met all of the requirements in our canons for what an annual meeting is supposed to do. If you would be willing to just look at these 2 and think about where there may have been storytelling in these, right? This does not mean there was not storytelling here. Where would you like to hear a story as you look at either of these 2 and imagine yourself in one of these meetings? If you would be willing to, in the chat, just share, what are your thoughts about where storytelling might add something to what you see here? Discussion of new ministries. All of the above. Mhm. Reports, outreach, and ministry. The rector's report, highlights of accomplishments. Yep. Yep. Elections. Mhm. So what I'm seeing here and what I think you are all seeing is that actually every aspect of these example agendas is an opportunity for storytelling. There's really nothing here where storytelling could not add something or be part of the richness, add to the richness of the conversation and of the meeting. So I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of stories we might tell and some experiences that I've had in congregations that really shaped annual meetings around storytelling. So stories from current ministry, this is what a number of you have identified, and what we saw in those 2 example agendas, right, is that there was a reflection on a time taken to reflect on and share and honor current ministries. And those stories, the richness of those stories, the way that they will build community and offer the most we can offer in an annual meeting is when we focus them on how God is active in our place, how our lives are being transformed by that activity, and how our community is becoming more vital because of that. Even in congregations where things feel hard, God is active. Even in congregations where things feel hard, God is transforming lives. And even in congregations where things feel hard, God is a source of vitality in that community. So really, these are the stories we tell in our annual meetings. And those of you who know me know that I am deeply steeped in appreciative inquiry and appreciative approaches to our lives together, because the things that we focus on shape the possibilities for the future. And if we focus on the doom and gloom, what we've determined is that we're going with the doom and gloom. And if we focus on how God is active, how lives are being transformed, and how that is increasing vitality and offering vitality in our communities, that is where our energy will go. So this is an opportunity not to whitewash what our challenges are, but to look within those stories of challenges, even if those are the stories we feel need to be told, and find the places that they are actually revealing God's activity and the transformation that offers to us and the vitality that offers our communities. So there are so many ways that stories can reveal this and engage others with us in living further into it and benefiting from it. And then there are stories from the past. And this is something that I've seen in only 2 congregations. And yet I found it to be very profound, and others in the congregations did as well. And this is something that I think Scripture offers to us as an understanding of the role of stories in community. So one of the places you can look for stories of the past is prior annual reports. If you are responsible for any ministry in your place, you've probably been asked to write something, a couple paragraphs about that ministry for a written annual report. Places that go back and read excerpts from those, it offers a lot to a congregation. It connects the current congregation with the people throughout time and over time. So often, the person who wrote the senior warden's report in 1971 is now an octogenarian in the congregation, is still active, and is someone everybody knows. And it really connects that congregation. Connections with ministry, the thread and trajectory and path of ministry in a place. The way that connects to culture and ethos. Congregations have ways that we live into our own spiritual lives. We emphasize different things. We have a culture and a personality. And these telling stories from prior annual reports helps us connect to that, recognize it, value it. And that is the activity of the Spirit through time that we have access to as we reflect on the places and the people and the ministry of this place over time. So that's one reason we're suggesting to you that this is another place to look for stories during your annual meeting that could be told during your annual meeting. Any questions or observations or thoughts about this, you can unmute and offer them if you wish to. It'd be great if you would raise your hand so we're not talking over people using the raise hand function. But if you don't know where that is, just go ahead and unmute. Has anyone experienced either of these at an annual meeting? Please share that if you're willing to.
We have, and this is Clay Jackson from St. Matthews. In Hawaii, I spent some time in Hawaii in my youth. And in Hawaii, there's a Hawaiian pidgin term that really it came from the Hawaiian language, and it's part of the oral history of Hawaii. And it says the term is talk story.
Mhm.
And that encapsulates exactly what you're speaking of, Carolyn, and what this is all about. It's a deep, personal, raw conversation about sharing and being in the moment and sharing oral history and traditions and all of those things. It's really kind of amazing to watch the old Hawaiians sit around and do that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and that's part of their broader culture reflected in their congregational culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Clay. Anyone else had an experience with storytelling in your annual meetings? Well, I am going to show you 3 examples of possible ways to incorporate storytelling. So here's an example, and I know this is a lot of words, but just take a moment and look at this. This is an example of a congregation where the entire group present at the annual meeting is invited to be part of storytelling with one another. So here, this meeting is designed to both have, for example, the rector's report, a story from congregational life in the past year, and the treasurer's report and the warden's report, a story from congregational life in the past year. And in between those, to engage the entire congregation in table conversations, sharing their own stories. It's important when you do this, you've experienced enough of these kinds of meetings, to have a really good prompt, right? What you need is a way that people know what you're asking them to do. A story of an event or an experience in the congregation that brought you close to God in the past year. And then it's important, if you do this kind of thing, to gather the insights and the themes from the stories, to share them more broadly. So you can see here, you might choose this kind of an approach to an annual meeting if you're a congregation that's in transition. A great way to engage the entire congregation in some storytelling, in solidifying its understanding of who it is and what's going on there. It might be a great time as part of doing some mission and vision work in your congregation. If you're in the midst of that, you can use the annual meeting as an opportunity for that. And it might be an opportunity if you know, actually coming back, for example, coming back from a time when people were dispersed. This could be a great way to bring people back together. If you have a lot of new members or new people who are showing up, this can be a great way to connect with them. It's a wonderful thing if you have a new cleric in your congregation so that they can hear the stories of the place. This is a way to get a lot of voices telling stories. Another example is one where you're incorporating this annual report idea. And in the places where I have seen this done most effectively, it's sort of woven in with the current stories. So you can see here, and this is an actual agenda from a congregation. You can see here that the vicar's report is a current time story. The annual report, this particular priest really felt, this congregation was about 25 years old, really felt it was important to go back to an early time. And then you can see the annual report excerpt from 10 years ago, a more recent time. And in between, everyone else who was asked to report was asked to report using story. And what this means is that we assume if you have written annual report from everybody, from all the ministries, you do not have to read that aloud, nor do you have to even summarize it. That a story offers an opportunity to encapsulate something important for this congregation at this time about God's activity. And doing that, I see your handy, and I'll get to you in just a second. Doing that also when you get to the financial report and the budget. A great time to be talking about the story of a place, the way that our money connects to our mission and ministry. The way that we engaged with one another in faithful generosity. So you can see that stories were actually laced through this from different time frames, focused on different things in this example. Dee, did you have something you wanted to say? Oh, you've disappeared. Bill has raised
You're muted. Dee, you're muted. There you go.
I wanted to comment on one of the sessions we had a couple of years ago when it was about the budget, and it was suggested that we use pie charts for reporting to the congregation, because people, even though they get the treasurer's report, most people can't make too much heads or tails out of it.
right.
And that was a very successful thing we did last year, and we're doing it again this year. And it gives the congregation a visual picture of where we spend our money and how it works. And so we had good comments on that. And I
Thank you,
wanted
Dee.
to
Yeah.
thank whoever got that. I think it was maybe Susan or somebody that suggested that would be a good storytelling vehicle to tell the financial story.
Thank you for bringing that up, because yes, stories are not just oral, right? Stories can also be told visually. And particularly when we're talking about things like budget and finances, it is really helpful to have pictures to help people absorb the story. We know that is true for us also with any story, that visuals help us absorb. So thank you for that, Dee. Bill.
Thanks, and I'm sorry, I can't turn my camera on for some reason, so I'm not deliberately blanking my image. It won't come on. But anyway, I like this the example you're presenting to us right now, because I suspect that one of the reasons people might dread an annual meeting is because of potential conflict in the congregation. And I know we don't like to talk about conflict, but all congregations have conflict and likely it's from stress, and likely the stress is from either budgets or staff issues. And when you tell the story from 20 years ago, or you tell the story from 10 years ago, you might, particularly if you're gleaning stories from past reports, that we've encountered those same stresses in the past, and we survived then. So we're likely to struggle through them again now, but it helps put our current issues in context of our past stories. And this is the character of the people we are, and we're the character of the people we are people who work through issues and find solutions.
Thank you. The same issues come up in places over and over and over again, right? Our places have unique charism, characteristics, culture, ethos. And actually, we will find when you do things like this that, yes, the resilience comes through, right? The idea that, oh, right, we also struggled with this 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And to do a good job of picking those excerpts, right? You pick the ones that if you pick that it's going to be 20 in 10 years, right? And you go through those annual reports, you will find stories there that resonate today. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Because congregations are beings, they are organic beings with lives that are continuous. And in those lives, our issues and the ways that we resolve them iterate and reiterate. And so you will find that. Thank you, Bill. And you will find the resilience in that. Yeah.
Caroline?
Yeah.
Glenda put an interesting note in the chat about suggesting that participants give permission for the stories that they share to be shared beyond the congregation. So almost this way of extending the church's story outside the church's walls. I thought that was worthy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Glenda. So just one other example of an agenda. And this is, again, this is a place that doesn't have a cleric, right? And yet, the opportunity for lay leaders who are accountable for different areas of ministry is no different in this kind of congregation, this structure of a congregation. To be able to highlight God's activity in our place in the various areas of ministry, and to use story as a way of building community both current time and across time, is present no matter what your structure is, no matter who your leaders are. It is possible for you to use stories as the primary guiding structure, the building blocks of the structure of your annual meeting. And you can still meet all the requirements for what an annual meeting has to be. So let's just talk about, how do you get ready to do this? If you wanted to try this, and we're doing this because we're encouraging you to try this in your annual meeting this year. How do you get ready? Well, the first thing is you need to figure out what stories ought to be told, right? So I probably should have put first the second bullet here, right? Your stories need to be highlighting examples or illustrations of importance, goals, themes, or accomplishments in your congregation. And the second most important bullet is that your stories need to focus on God, on what you experienced and observed, and on the impact on you and the congregation. Those are the stories you're looking for. So if your congregation is really committed to a feeding ministry, a story, truly a story, right, about an experience, an event in that feeding ministry is very powerful. That's the story you want to choose. And you want to choose a person who will tell it, who had direct experience of God's activity in that ministry. And if you are telling a story that includes others at a personal level, that person needs to get permission to share that, right? To reference those other individuals. Just to say, I am going to be telling a story of the time when you were part of. I want to make sure you know I'm going to do that, right? Is it all right with you? I don't need to mention you by name. Are you okay if I do? If not, I won't, right? So being sure, particularly if you want to mention anyone by name, that you have their permission. And stories need to be told in the voice of the person telling them, right? Don't have someone else write your story. Tell your own story. It's really important. It's far more powerful if you do that. So again, stories that are important to the congregation and its life, stories that focus on God and your experience and observations of God in your congregation and that in the impact, and from your direct experience. Really important in your voice. And then telling the story itself. And this is something, all of this page is something that I was able to glean and adapt from something that Canon Andrea used. If you were at convention this last year, you heard some really powerful stories from people of their experience of God in their life, in everyday discipleship. And so this whole page here, this whole slide is gleaned from that. It's adapted for this purpose. But it is really critical that you find a way to tell a story that is brief, right? That is about 3 minutes, that you can share in about 3 minutes at a comfortable speaking pace. It's important that it's a positive story in the sense that it's not we're not telling a fable with a moral that we want to pound into people, right? We are not preaching We're not chastising, editorializing, or offering opinions on social issues. We're telling a true story about ourselves and our congregations and the way God is active with us. And to be personal. So making sure that you or the people you invite to tell stories are able to talk in the first person about that experience. It doesn't all have to be, they don't have to be the only character, but they need to have had the personal experience that's being told in the story. Of course, this is not the case when we're reading annual reports from the past. We're hearing that in the voices of the people who lived those experiences. So we're sharing it, written in their own voice, even if they are not the ones who are verbalizing it at the time. So again, these notes are about how we tell stories that can have an impact and stories that will really be life-giving in our place. Choosing the right stories and choosing how to tell them. Okay, so now I'm going to come back and give people a chance to reflect on this for a few minutes, but just to say, this is why we're doing this. We're doing this because stories are powerful. We're recommending this to you for your annual meetings because we don't want annual meetings to be perfunctory, something you just have to get through because, oh, it's in the canons and we kind of dread them. But we go because there's a great potluck. And sometimes there's a hymn that we love and everybody knows it really well. And we close with it every single time, right? We want annual meetings to be life-giving experiences in our places. Times when we share experiences of God in our community, times when we recognize patterns and connections across time, times when we can focus, we can help the congregation focus on what's important to us, what really matters. And we can affirm and deepen the goals and ministries and culture and ethos of our communities. And stories do all of that for us. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and just open it up for people to share your thoughts on this. And again, if you raise your hand using the raise hand function, that's great. You can also just unmute, knowing you might end up talking over someone. Thoughts, reactions. Are you willing to try this out? Can you imagine this in your place?
I can imagine it in our place. I feel like when I look back at some of the past annual meetings, some of the storytelling that we had then were the most significant parts of the annual meeting because it had something to share and everybody could identify something in a story. And it also made it more important on what you were doing, even the small things that you did, because sometimes some of the best things come out of the smallest things that you do. It could be just simply talking about the food or whatever, remembering something that happened before, or it's just a way of bringing everybody together. And it's kind of hard sometimes because the annual meeting is about elections and in a large part about the financial part of it. And I don't know about all of you, but nobody wants to talk that much about money. and yet we have to have it, and they have to contribute. But at the same time, you need to have a way to make the community of your church their family and part of their shared stuff, like you do at holidays when your family comes over. Everybody comes for Christmas. Well, everybody comes for the Christmas service at church. That's true, but it's something that you do that everybody gets together and it builds community. And so I think the storytelling has always been important. And I've heard it and participated in it, mostly for comic relief, because there's a lot of really funny things that go on, in the life of the church. But
yeah, God is also a jokester. God does like comic relief. I have experienced God a lot in the comic. Thank you, Susan. And I do want to say that storytelling is as much about telling as it is about listening, right? Storytelling requires both sides. And remember, this coming year, we are really focusing on how are we listening to God and to God through one another, because we hear God in the voices of those who are telling us these stories as well. And so, yes, thank you. Sandy Peck has said she can imagine this. And their written reports are extended until Sunday so they can take in what they learned this evening. Yeah, your written reports can also include stories. And your written reports can stand as much more detail over what we did and who was involved. And then you can excerpt a story from that as the thing that's offered orally in a place. Yeah. Others, anyone else want to offer a reflection on what we've talked about tonight and how you might use it?
I think the idea of putting a congregational storytelling time, table conversations in that meeting, which, as long as you can keep the agenda tight, because people are always going, how long am I going to be here after church, and how much longer are we going to go on? But if there was a way for even a 10-minute table conversation, I think it invites people into this concept of interaction on a topic. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things to know, if stories are really kept to about 3 minutes, all of those agendas could be accomplished in less than an hour and a half. Every single one of the ones I showed you, if the stories are truly kept to 3 minutes. And so that's something that the storytellers are accountable for. And then if you're doing what Christian is suggesting, which is the example, which was the entire congregation is involved, you have fewer individual stories surrounding that, right? You want a few, but you really focus the center of the time, right? Yeah, you have 10 or 15 minutes that are there where at the tables, people can share. You can still accomplish it in less than 90 minutes. Yeah. Others. Yeah, Tim. Oh, you're muted.
There, got it.
There you go.
So yeah, this will fit right in with us at a West Central Abbey because storytelling is just part of it's our culture there. So every Sunday liturgy, we have part of our service is someone tells a story. And someone from the congregation will just come up and tell a story. And I can't tell you how many times that's been the best part of the whole liturgy, the thing that really connected with everyone. And that's what we do at our bishops committee meetings is there's always storytelling there. And usually when we get together for our congregational meetings, we usually have a time where we break off and just share stories with each other. So I think that's something that we're kind of used to doing already. And I can tell you that from experience that it has been very powerful for us and something that everybody really looks forward to.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so here's the thing. We are doing this because we want you to try it. We are offering this tonight because we want each of you to try this in your congregations. You can try it with just one story. You don't have to have an agenda with as much storytelling as those I offered you, although I would love you to try doing that. I think it would really transform your annual meeting. If that feels too scary, just pick one or two of those things that you usually put your facilities report. Make it a story. Have someone tell a story. They can read the facilities report about the plumbing issue and the way there was, a flood in the preschool space and, the skylight leaked. I don't know. I guess I'm interested in water right now, but they can read that, right? Tell the story. Tell the story of the community coming together, everybody bringing their shop vacs when that flood happened.
Mhm.
and how that was an opportunity in community and where we saw God there with us,
Yep.
right? So really think about even just one or two of those opportunities, or take the challenge of working with your leadership to shape the entire agenda of your annual meeting around stories. And don't miss out on the opportunity for that to be the financial report and the budget. In some ways, that's the place where the most change might happen in your meeting if you approach that as storytelling, and really use it as an opportunity. So that is what we have for you tonight. It is 8 o'clock. This year, one of the things that is happening with these First Thursday Zooms is we're going to be keeping this time, the general time for everybody, to an hour. And then we do have 3 congregations that are involved in a congregational development initiative that is building on this work. And they are going to stay for the 30 minutes afterwards. So we are going to pray us all out. And those who are here from those 3 congregations who know who they are, please stay on. And we are happy. Please reach out to me or to Susan or to Andrea if you have any questions or you want support incorporating storytelling into your annual meeting. We would love to help you do that. So reach out directly to us at any time. Susan.
All right. I am going to pray at this time our diocesan prayer. So the Lord be with you. Creator of all, you speak life into being and call us into holy community. Open our ears to listen, enliven our curiosity to learn, and hasten our courage to respond. Teach us how to listen and love as you do, joining with all creation as we proclaim and embody your good news in all that we undertake. May the Spirit's breath empower us to live these words, we pray, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you to everyone for coming. This was wonderful to see so many people here.
Is this open to everybody? Anybody can join this meeting?
Absolutely. Every month, first Thursday. Anybody can join.
All right.
Woohoo.